The airport thrummed with the chaotic pulse of life, a sprawling symphony of hurried footsteps, rolling suitcases, and muffled voices reverberating through the vast terminal. Families clustered near their gates, weary parents clutching coffee cups while their children darted around, leaving trails of laughter in their wake. Business travelers in crisp suits wove through the crowd with practiced efficiency, their eyes glued to phones or distant departure boards. Amid this restless tide of humanity stood Monica Carter, a beacon of quiet strength near the first-class check-in counter. Her caramel skin caught the gentle glow of the overhead lights, accentuating the elegance of her flowing silk blouse and tailored slacks. Her braided hair, neatly swept back, framed a face that radiated calm anticipation. She adjusted the strap of her leather handbag, her fingers brushing the smooth surface as she allowed herself a faint smile, already envisioning the journey ahead, a flight to Denver for a conference, where her voice would carry weight and purpose. As the line shuffled forward, Monica stepped up to the counter. Her boarding pass extended with a graceful confidence. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice a warm melody edged with firmness. "I have an upgrade to first class on flight to 117 to Denver." The woman behind the desk, a sharp-featured blonde with a pinched expression, barely lifted her gaze, before her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Monica's face with an intensity that felt like a cold blade. She took the boarding pass, her movements deliberate, almost theatrical. As she swiped it through the scanner, a soft beep confirmed its validity, but the woman's face remained a mask of stone. "HM," she muttered, her fingers tapping the keyboard with exaggerated slowness, as if each keystroke were a judgment. Monica stood patiently, though her grip on the counter tightened ever so slightly, a subtle signal of the unease stirring within her. Something was wrong, something deeper than a glitch or a mix-up. After a pause that stretched far too long, the woman looked up, her lips thinning into a tight, unyielding line. "It seems there's an issue with your upgrade," she said, her tone clipped and dripping with condescension. "This seat isn't available anymore." Monica's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her features. "That's strange," she replied, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. "I confirmed the upgrade just yesterday, and I have the receipt right here." She reached into her bag, retrieving a neatly folded sheet of paper, and slid it across the counter with quiet determination. The woman didn't even glance at it. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that cut through the hum of the terminal. "Look, I don't know how you managed to get this ticket, but first class is full. You'll need to go back to economy." The words landed like a slap, raw and deliberate, exposing a wound Monica hadn't expected to feel that day. Her breath caught, but she refused to flinch. She straightened her spine, her dark eyes locking onto the woman's with unwavering resolve. "I don't believe that's accurate," she said, each syllable measured and firm. "Please check again." A smirk tugged at the woman's lips, a cruel little twist that betrayed her satisfaction. She leaned back, crossing her arms with a defiant air. "There's nothing to check." "Do you want me to call security?" The threat sliced through the air, sharp and biting, drawing the attention of nearby passengers who paused mid-step, their curiosity piqued by the escalating tension. Monica's cheeks flushed not with shame, but with a slow-burning anger that simmered beneath her composed exterior. She'd faced moments like this before, subtle jabs and outright dismissals rooted in something uglier than bureaucracy. Years of navigating such hostility had honed her ability to stay calm, to channel her fury into clarity. "Call security if you must," she said evenly, her voice a quiet thunder. "But I'd prefer you escalate this to someone who can resolve it without turning it into a spectacle." For a fleeting moment, the woman's smirk wavered, a crack in her armor revealing a flicker of doubt. She turned abruptly, gesturing to a colleague, a tall, balding man with a clipboard pressed against his chest like a talisman. After a hushed exchange, their words swallowed by the ambient noise, he strode toward Monica with the brisk, impatient gait of someone eager to dismiss a nuisance. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone edged with irritation as he loomed over the counter. Monica recounted the situation with the same unshakable calm, her words precise as she gestured to the boarding pass and receipt. Behind him, the blonde woman watched, arms folded, her amusement thinly veiled as if this were a game she'd already won. The man barely glanced at the documents before shaking his head. "Ma'am, this upgrade isn't valid anymore," he said, his voice flat and dismissive. "I suggest you take your seat in economy." Monica's fingers tightened around the boarding pass, her nails pressing into the paper as she fought to keep her composure. "I have a confirmed receipt," she said, her tone dropping to a low, deliberate cadence. "This is starting to feel discriminatory. Please escalate this to someone higher up." The man scoffed, his face twisting into a sneer that oozed contempt. "Let me make this clear, you're not sitting in first class." End of discussion. His words echoed through the gate area, drawing murmurs from the growing crowd of onlookers. Some shifted uncomfortably, others craned their necks, drawn to the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. Monica stood motionless, her heartbeat a steady drum against the heat rising in her chest. She glanced at her watch, then back at the pair behind the counter. This wasn't a mistake, it was a power play, a deliberate attempt to strip her of what was rightfully hers. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out her phone, her movements calm but purposeful. "If you're unwilling to handle this professionally," she said, "I'll have to make a call." The man let out a dry, mocking chuckle. "Go ahead, call whoever you want." Monica stepped aside, her fingers dialing a number she knew by heart. She pressed the phone to her ear, her voice steady as she spoke. "Elizabeth, it's Monica. I'm at the airport, and there's been an incident." The onlookers whispered louder, their voices a buzzing chorus of speculation as she turned her back to the gate agents. Her conversation was brief, her words clipped but heavy with intent. When she hung up, she faced the staff again, her expression a fortress of resolve. "You'll want to stay close," she said. "Help is on the way." For the first time, the blonde woman's smirk faltered, unease flickering in her pale blue eyes like a candle caught in a draft. The air at the gate thickened, charged with a restless energy that pulsed through the crowd. Monica stood rooted in place, her fingers resting lightly on the counter's edge, her stillness a stark contrast to the fidgeting staff. The blonde shifted her weight, her once confident posture crumbling as she glanced nervously at her watch. The supervisor paced a few steps behind her, his clipboard now a flimsy shield against the mounting tension. Monica felt their stares boring into her, but she refused to bend. She'd spent years carving out her place in a world that often tried to shrink her, and she wouldn't let these petty gatekeepers unravel her dignity. Not here, not now. Time crawled by, each minute an eternity of anticipation. The terminal sounds blurred into a distant human announcements crackling overhead, the clatter of luggage wheels, the murmur of conversation still fading as Monica held her ground. Then, from the edge of the gate area, a figure emerged. She moved with the purposeful stride of someone who commanded respect, a woman in a sleek gray suit, her chestnut hair pulled into a low bun, her sharp eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a hawk. The crowd parted instinctively as she approached, her presence a quiet storm. The blonde gate agent brightened, misreading the arrival as salvation. "Good, you're here," she began, gesturing toward Monica with a flourish of exasperation. "This passenger has been causing." The woman in the suit raised a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. Her gaze settled on Monica, assessing her with a flicker of recognition, before turning to the gate agent. "Let's start with what happened," she said, her voice crisp and professional, cutting through the tension like a blade. The blonde hesitated, her bravado crumbling. "Well, she claims to have a first-class upgrade, but the system shows no such thing. We've explained this, but she's being difficult." Monica arched an eyebrow at the accusation, but she held her silence, letting the truth speak through the evidence she'd already presented. The woman in the suit glanced at the boarding pass and receipt, her expression unreadable as she processed the details. Then, with a subtle shift, her demeanor hardened. "This ticket is valid," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The error is on your end, and the way you've handled this suggests more than incompetence." The blonde's face drained of color, her earlier smugness evaporating as the weight of her actions settled over her. The supervisor froze, his clipboard trembling slightly in his grip. Monica watched, her heart steady, but her mind alight with the realization that justice wasn't just coming, it was here, unfolding with a quiet, unrelenting force. In that moment, the lesson crystallized. Power, when wielded without accountability, breeds arrogance, but it cannot withstand the light of truth. Monica had stood her ground, not out of pride, but out of a deep-seated belief that dignity and fairness must prevail. The consequences of the staff's abuse of authority rippled outward, a stark reminder that no one, not even those cloaked in petty control, escaped the reckoning of their choices. As the woman in the suit took charge, issuing clipped instructions to rectify the situation, Monica felt a quiet triumph bloom within her. This wasn't just about a seat, it was about a world where justice, though slow, would always find its way. The woman in the crisp suit pivoted on her heel, her piercing eyes locking onto Monica once more. Her gaze was a blade, honed by years of authority, slicing through the tense air at the boarding gate. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass and any documentation you have for the upgrade?" she asked, her voice clipped yet carrying an undertone of strained politeness. Monica, standing tall despite the weight of the moment, reached into her sleek leather bag with deliberate calm. Her fingers brushed against the cool, neatly folded paper she'd tucked away earlier that morning, a small talisman of her rightful place. She pulled it out and handed it over without a flicker of hesitation, her silence a shield as she watched the woman's every move. The suited figure unfolded the document with meticulous care, her manicured nails catching the harsh fluorescent light overhead. She studied it intently, her lips pursed into a thin line as the seconds ticked by, each one stretching the silence into something almost tangible. Monica's eyes narrowed slightly as she observed the woman's brow crease, the faint lines etching deeper into her forehead with every tap of her fingers against the gate terminal's keyboard. The rhythmic clicking filled the void, a staccato soundtrack to the unfolding drama. Then, a flush of subtle, creeping pink began to climb the woman's neck, betraying her composure. She'd found something, Monica realized, her pulse quickening with a mix of anticipation and vindication. At last, the woman looked up, her expression tight as if the words she was about to speak were being forcibly pried from her throat. "It appears there was an error on our end," she admitted, her voice taut with reluctant accountability. She swiveled toward the blonde gate agent standing nearby, her tone sharpening like a whip cracking through the air. "This ticket is valid. The upgrade was processed correctly." The gate agent's face drained of color, her pale skin turning almost translucent under the scrutiny. Her lips parted as if to argue, a flicker of defiance sparking in her wide blue eyes. But the woman in the suit raised a hand, silencing her with the finality of a guillotine. "The situation should never have escalated to this point," she snapped, her words cutting through the stifling atmosphere. "I'll take it from here." Monica felt the weight of those words settle over her, an unspoken apology wrapped in bureaucratic stiffness, but it wasn't enough, not yet. Her fingers brushed the edge of her watch, a sleek silver band glinting under the terminal lights. As she calculated the minutes ticking by, timing was everything, and she was playing this perfectly. "Thank you for verifying my ticket," Monica said, her voice smooth and steady, though it carried a razor's edge that sliced through the tension. She straightened her posture, her dark eyes boring into the woman before her. "However, this isn't just about the ticket anymore. It's about how I was treated, how assumptions were made about me." Before anyone even bothered to glance at the facts, the woman in the suit faltered, her carefully constructed mask of neutrality slipping for a fleeting moment. She opened her mouth to respond, perhaps to smooth over the jagged edges of the confrontation. But before the words could form, a soft buzz hummed from Monica's hand, her phone. She glanced down at the screen, and a small, knowing smile curved her lips, a private victory blooming in the midst of the chaos. "Excuse me," she murmured, stepping a few paces away to answer the call, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The voice on the other end was deep and resolute, a steady anchor in the storm. "Monica, I'm 5 minutes out. Is everything under control?" It was Elizabeth, her tone laced with the quiet authority that had carried her through years of leadership. Monica's grip tightened around the phone, a flicker of relief softening her features. "Yes, Elizabeth," she replied, her voice low but firm. "They've verified the ticket, but the situation hasn't been properly addressed yet." A pause. Then Elizabeth's response came, crisp and unwavering. "Understood. I'll be there shortly. Stay where you are." Monica ended the call with a decisive tap, slipping the phone back into her pocket as she returned to the counter. Her composure was a fortress, unshaken by the tremor she noticed in the gate agent's hench blonde woman, now avoiding her gaze entirely, her fingers twisting nervously around a pen. The supervisor, a weary man with thinning hair, had stopped his restless pacing behind the counter. His face was flushed a deep crimson, beads of sweat glistening at his temples as his earlier bravado crumbled into dust. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his clipboard dangling uselessly at his side, a relic of his misplaced confidence. The woman in the suit stepped forward again, her expression a carefully sculpted mask of neutrality, though Monica could sense the unease simmering beneath it. "Ma'am, we sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding," she began, her voice softer now, placating. "If there's anything we can do to make this right." But before she could finish, the air shifted. A ripple of anticipation coursed through the gate area as the sound of measured, purposeful footsteps echoed closer. Heads turned, eyes widened, and a hush fell over the scattered passengers as a new figure emerged into the scene. Elizabeth Davis, the governor, strode into view, her presence an undeniable force that seemed to bend the very space around her. She wasn't tall, but her stature was irrelevant. Her tailored navy suit hugged her frame with impeccable precision, and her steely gray eyes swept the room with the weight of a judge's gavel. The gate agent recoiled as if struck, her mouth falling open in a silent gasp, the pen slipping from her trembling fingers to clatter onto the counter. The supervisor's clipboard followed suit, hitting the floor with a sharp thud that punctuated the thickening silence. Even the woman in the suit shrank slightly, her shoulders stiffening as Elizabeth's gaze landed on her like a spotlight. "Monica," Elizabeth said warmly, her voice cutting through the stunned stillness as she ignored the chaos around her. "Are you all right?" Monica met her friend's eyes, a spark of satisfaction igniting within her. "I am now," she replied, her tone carrying a quiet triumph. Elizabeth turned to the airline staff, her expression hardening into something unyielding, a storm brewing behind her calm facade. "I believe we need to have a conversation about what happened here," she said, her words measured but laced with an icy edge. The gate area fell into a suffocating silence, every breath held, every eye riveted on the confrontation unfolding before them. Monica stood beside the governor, her chin lifted, feeling the tide shift in her favor. Justice had arrived not as a fleeting gesture, but as a reckoning that promised to ripple far beyond this moment. The air was thick with tension, every sound dulled by the weight of accountability pressing down on the scene. Elizabeth Davis stood at the heart of it all, her gaze sharp enough to carve through metal. Monica felt the strength radiating from here, a pillar of resolve forged through years of friendship and shared battles. It was a quiet power, one that reassured her even as it commanded the room. The blonde gate agent's bravado had evaporated entirely, her trembling fingers clutching the edge of the counter as she stared at the floor, unable to meet the governor's piercing stare. The supervisor's flushed face glistened with sweat, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance reduced to a pitiful stammer. The woman in the suit lingered to the side, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as if to steady herself against the storm. Elizabeth drew a slow, deliberate breath, her eyes scanning the scene like a general assessing a battlefield. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried a frigid undercurrent that made the air itself seem to shiver. "I need someone to explain to me," she began, each word deliberate, how a confirmed, valid ticket for a first-class seat was suddenly deemed invalid. Why my friend had to endure this level of humiliation, just to prove what should never have been questioned. The gate agent's lips quivered as she tried to respond, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't personal," she stammered, her blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. "There was a mistake in the system, and I..." Elizabeth raised a hand, her gesture swift and final. "Stop," she said, her tone unyielding. "This isn't the time for excuses. It's the time for accountability." She turned her gaze to the supervisor, who flinched as if her words had struck him physically. "And you," she pressed, her voice steady but laced with a quiet fury. "Did you review the evidence before siding with your staff? Did you take even a single moment to consider the implications of your actions?" The man's throat worked as he struggled to find his voice, his eyes dropping to the floor where his clipboard lay abandoned. "To thought," he began, but his words dissolved into a feeble mumble. "You thought what?" Elizabeth's voice rose slightly, the controlled anger within it slicing through the haze. "That it was easier to dismiss her claims than to do your job properly. That you could intimidate her into silence because you assumed she wouldn't fight back?" Monica watched in silence, her hands folded calmly in front of her, though her chest tightened with a mix of relief and lingering indignation. Around her, the other passengers stood frozen, their curiosity tinged with unease as they witnessed the tables turn. For once, the whispers weren't aimed at her, they buzzed instead around the staff, who had treated her with such callous disregard. Elizabeth straightened, her voice ringing with unshakable authority. "This behavior is unacceptable on every level. It's unprofessional, unethical, and let's not dance around it discriminatory. You don't get to treat people differently based on the assumptions you make about them." The gate agent's cheeks flared a vivid red, tears spilling over as she opened her mouth to speak. But Elizabeth silenced her once more. "Save your apologies for the airline's HR department," she said sharply. "You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself there." Turning to Monica, her expression softened, a flicker of warmth breaking through the steel. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Monica nodded, though the knot of tension in her chest hadn't fully unraveled. "I'm fine now. Thanks to you," she said, her voice steady. Elizabeth placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a quiet gesture of solidarity, before stepping back to address the woman in the suit. "You seem like the only person here with any authority," she said, her tone expectant. "What's the airline's plan to make this right?" The woman shifted uncomfortably, her heels scuffing faintly against the floor. But she quickly regained her poise. "We will, of course, provide Ms. Carter with a complimentary first-class seat and ensure she's treated with the respect she deserves for the remainder of her journey," she said, her voice measured but tinged with deference. Elizabeth tilted her head, her expression unimpressed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "That's a start," she said, sarcasm dripping from her words, "but it's hardly enough. This isn't just about one ticket, it's about a culture that allows this kind of behavior to fester unchecked." The woman nodded hastily, sensing the gravity of the moment pressing down on her. "I'll ensure a full investigation is launched into this incident," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "We'll review our policies and training programs to prevent anything like this from happening again." Elizabeth's eyes narrowed slightly. "You'll do more than review," she countered, her voice sharp as a blade. "You'll overhaul them, and I'll be following up personally to ensure those changes are implemented." The woman's nod was hesitant this time, her lips pressing into a tight line as she weighed her options: compliance or defiance. She chose silence, a wise retreat. Elizabeth turned back to Monica, her demeanor softening as she gestured toward the boarding gate. "Let's get you on that plane," she said, her voice warm and steady. Monica nodded, her shoulders finally easing as the weight of the ordeal began to lift. Together, they moved toward the jet bridge, the sound of their footsteps a quiet rhythm against the polished floor. Behind them, the gate agent and supervisor remained rooted in place, statues of their own making, stand humbled and stripped of the power they'd wielded so carelessly. In that moment, Monica felt more than just relief. She felt the profound weight of justice settling into place, a lesson carved into the air around them. Power, when abused, carried consequences, and those who wielded it without care would inevitably face its reckoning. For the staff, it was a bitter pill, a stark reminder that assumptions could unravel into accountability. For Monica, it was a victory, hard-won and deeply felt, a testament to the strength of standing firm and the unshakable force of a friend who refused to let injustice slide. The faces of the onlookers were drained of color, their eyes averted, heavy with the burden of what they'd witnessed. A hush fell over the crowd as it parted silently, carving a path for Monica and Elizabeth to pass through. Monica's heart thudded in her chest, a chaotic blend of awe at her own resilience and guilt for the scene that had unfolded. She could feel the weight of every gaze, some curious, some judgmental, boring into her as she moved forward. Elizabeth, walking beside her, radiated a quiet strength, her chin lifted despite the storm they'd just weathered. As Monica sank into the plush embrace of her airplane seat, she couldn't ignore the flight attendants' fleeting, cautious glances. Their smiles were tight, plastered on like masks, their movements stiff and deliberate, as if each step was calculated to erase the tension that still hung in the air. To Monica, their unease was a silent admission, a subtle nod to the injustice she'd endured. She didn't resent their discomfort. In a way, it felt like validation. Letting out a slow, measured breath, she allowed her body to meld into the seat's luxury, though its softness couldn't fully soothe the raw ache of humiliation that gnawed at her. Closing her eyes, Monica let the memories flood back, each one slicing through her mind with vivid clarity. The confrontation at the gate replayed in slow motion, the raised voices, the dismissive gestures, the sting of being treated as less than human. She could still feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the way her hands had trembled as she fought to keep her composure. When a flight attendant approached, her tray bearing a delicate glass of champagne, Monica's eyes fluttered open. She didn't reach for it. The young woman faltered, her hand hovering uncertainly, her voice a fragile whisper. "Is there anything else I can get for you, ma'am?" she asked, her tone so polite it bordered on reverence. Monica studied her for a long moment. The attendant's wide eyes betrayed a flicker of genuine remorse. Though she hadn't been part of the earlier chaos, there was something earnest in her posture, a quiet plea for forgiveness on behalf of others. Monica's lips curved into a small, restrained smile. "Water, please," she said, her voice soft but firm. The attendant nodded eagerly, retreating as if grateful to escape unscathed. Monica's gaze drifted to the window, where the plane crept along the tarmac, the terminal lights glowing faintly against the deepening twilight. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, the sharp edges of her features softened by the dim light. She traced the lines of her face with her eyes, wondering why dignity always felt like a prize she had to wrestle from the world, even in places she'd earned the right to occupy. The plane ascended smoothly, its engines purring as it sliced through the evening sky. Monica reclined further, her thoughts spiraling inward. Her phone lay untouched in her bag, but Elizabeth's earlier words echoed in her mind. Steady and resolute, you shouldn't have to fight this fight alone. The governor had spoken with unshakable conviction, her dark eyes blazing with indignation. People like them thrive on your silence. They wield it like a blade. But your voice, that's your armor. At the time, Monica had nodded, warmed by Elizabeth's fierce loyalty. Now, suspended thousands of feet above the earth, those words took on a heavier weight, sinking deep into her bones. This wasn't just her battle, it was a war fought by countless others. Every soul who'd ever been diminished, dismissed, or deemed unworthy. She'd clawed her way to victory today, but how many had stumbled away? Too broken or weary to push back, her reverie shattered as footsteps approached. She turned to see a man in a crisp, tailored uniform, cabin supervisor, his badge gleaming under the cabin lights. He stopped a few paces away, his posture rigid yet respectful, his face a careful mask of neutrality. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice even but tinged with deference. "I wanted to personally apologize for what happened at the gate. It was unacceptable, and I assure you we're taking steps to address it." Monica regarded him silently, her expression a blank canvas. She could sense his unease, the way he shifted slightly under her scrutiny. "Thank you for saying that," she replied, her tone cool and deliberate. "But words are just the start. Real change demands action." The supervisor nodded, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "I agree completely, ma'am. We've already launched a review of our policies, and those responsible will face consequences. If there's anything more we can do to ensure your comfort, please let me know." She held his gaze, letting the silence stretch, then soften slightly. "I appreciate the effort, but comfort isn't the point, respect is." He dipped his head, as if absorbing a quiet reprimand. "Understood," he said simply, before retreating. As the flight wore on, the cabin grew still, the attendants gliding through the aisles with practiced grace, their presence unobtrusive. The steady drone of the engines lulled Monica into a fragile calm. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather notebook, its surface smooth beneath her fingertips. Flipping it open, she began to write, her pen tracing deliberate paths across the Pagea ritual she'd honed over years of grappling with moments like these. "What happened today wasn't just about me," she wrote, her thoughts spilling out in measured strokes. "It was about a system, A culture that lets certain biases fester unchecked. If I hadn't pushed back, if I didn't have the means, the voice, or the allies to demand justice, how quickly would I have been brushed aside? How many others have been? She paused, the pen trembling above the paper. Beyond the window, stars pierced the velvet darkness, their light unwavering. Change doesn't bloom in comfort, she continued. It grows from unease, from forcing people to face what they'd rather ignore. Today was a step forward, but it's only the start. The fight goes on for me, and for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. The words felt like a vow, etched not just for herself but for anyone who might one day find strength in them. Closing the notebook, she tucked it away, a quiet peace settling over her for the first time that night. As the plane descended toward Denver, Monica peered out the window, the city's lights twinkling like a constellation below. It was a world she knew, well, flawed, uneven, but hers to shape. The wheels kissed the tarmac with a gentle thud, and a renewed sense of purpose pulsed through her. This journey wasn't just about claiming a seat, it was about forging space where none had existed, ensuring others wouldn't have to endure the same struggles. Stepping into the terminal, the air was crisp, biting against her skin. The hum of voices and footsteps swirled around her, but her mind remained steady. Her heels tapped rhythmically against the polished floor as she headed toward baggage claim. The day's events replaying like a reel she couldn't stop. The victory at the gate had been hard-won, but it was a fleeting triumph if it didn't spark broader change. Near the carousel, a family caught her eye, a mother and father shepherding to children through the bustling crowd. The boy, barely 7, gripped his mother's hand, his round face alight with wonder as he took in the chaos of the terminal. His sister, a lanky girl of 10, chattered animatedly, her braids swaying with each exaggerated gesture as she recounted some adventure from their flight. Monica's lips twitched into a faint smile. There was something pure in their energy, a lens unclouded by the cynicism that adulthood often brought. She envied that clarity, the way children saw possibility where others saw barriers. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft buzz from her bag. Fishing out her phone, she glanced at the screen. Elizabeth. "Hey," she answered, her voice warm but threaded with fatigue. "I didn't expect you to call so soon." Elizabeth's tone was steady, laced with concern. "I wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" Monica's eyes drifted to the carousel, where bags began to tumble onto the belt with rhythmic thuds. "I'm fine," she said after a beat. "Tired, but fine. You're allowed to feel more than that," Elizabeth pressed gently. "What happened today wasn't just tiring, it was soul-crushing. And you faced it with more grace than most could muster." A soft laugh escaped Monica's lips. "Grace or sheer stubbornness? I'm not always sure. Maybe both," Elizabeth replied, a smile coloring her words. "Either way, you showed them what justice looks like. And that's no small thing." Monica stood by the baggage claim, her posture slightly wilted as exhaustion tugged at her frame. The carousel hummed and whirred, a monotonous drone that barely registered in her ears. Her friend Elizabeth's voice cut through the haze, sharp with indignation. "I'm proud of you, Monica, truly. But more than that, I'm furious on your behalf. What happened today with those people did it was beyond unacceptable." Her words carried a weight, a fierce loyalty that made Monica's chest tighten. She sighed, her shoulders dipping as she replied, "It's not the first time, Elizabeth. You know that as well as I do. And it won't be the last." Her tone was soft, resigned, but beneath it simmered a quiet frustration she'd carried for years. Elizabeth's response came swiftly, her voice firm and unyielding. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean we sit back and let it slide. It means we push harder, fight smarter, and you don't have to face it alone." The carousel let out a shrill beep, snapping Monica's attention to the stream of bags sliding past. Her eyes locked onto her suitcase, a sleek, black number with a bold red tag dangling from the handle, a small rebellion against the uniformity of travel. She stepped forward, her movements fluid despite the weariness clinging to her bones, and tugged the bag free with a practiced ease. As she turned to leave, her mind already drifting to the next step, a tentative figure emerged from the crowd. A young woman, no older than 25, approached her cautiously. She was dressed simply, faded jeans hugging her legs, a gray hoodie swallowing her slight frame. A cascade of tight curls framed her face like a halo, catching the harsh fluorescent light of the terminal. "Excuse me," she said, her voice so soft it trembled at the edges, as though she feared it might break. I saw what happened back at the gate. I didn't know what to say then, didn't know how to step in. But I just wanted you to know you inspired me." Monica froze, her breath catching in her throat. The words hit her like a sudden gust of wind. "Unexpected and disarming. Inspired you?" she echoed, her voice gentle, almost disbelieving. The young woman nodded eagerly, her eyes wide and earnest. "Yes. I've been in moments like that too many times, really where I just freeze, unsure how to stand up for myself. But watching you were so calm, so steady, so strong. It made me feel like maybe I could be that way too. It gave me hope. So, thank you." The sincerity in her voice wrapped around Monica like a warm embrace, softening the jagged edges of the day. A slow smile spread across her face, her heart swelling with a quiet pride she hadn't expected to feel. "Thank you for telling me that," she said, her words deliberate and warm. "Sometimes it feels like pushing back doesn't change anything, like it's just noise swallowed by the chaos. But hearing that it reached you, that it mattered means more than I can say." The woman's eyes glistened, a flicker of emotion dancing in them. "It does matter," she insisted. "Please don't ever stop." Monica met her gaze, her resolve hardening. "I won't," she promised, her voice steady as steel, "and neither should you." By the time Monica stepped outside, the sun had surrendered to the horizon, leaving the sky awash in deep purples and blues, a canvas of twilight that stretched endlessly above the bustling airport. A sleek black sedan idled at the curb, its tinted windows gleaming under the sodium lights. The driver, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face etched with quiet competence, climbed out as she approached. He offered a curt nod, his demeanor professional yet kind. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice gravelly but polite. "That's me," Monica confirmed, handing over her suitcase. He took it with care, placing it in the trunk as though it were something fragile, then opened the back door for her with a subtle flourish. As the car pulled away, the city unfolded beyond the window, golden streaks of light bleeding into white, as buildings blurred past. Inside, the silence was a balm, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that had battered her all day. She sank into the leather seat, letting the stillness settle over her like a second skin. Her phone buzzed sharply, jolting her from the reverie. She fished it from her bag, her fingers brushing against the cool metal as she unlocked the screen. An email glowed in her inbox, the subject line crisp and formal, a message from the airline's corporate office. Her eyes skimmed the text, a carefully worded apology for the incident, assurances of an investigation, promises of policy changes to ensure it wouldn't happen again. She closed the email with a flick of her thumb, her lips pressing into a tight, thin line. Words were cheap, she thought, a fleeting gesture typed out by someone paid to smooth over messes. Real accountability demanded more reaction, follow-through, consequences. She'd make sure they didn't squirm out of it this time. The car eased to a stop before her hotel, a towering monolith of glass and steel that shimmered like a beacon in the night. The driver opened her door, and she stepped out, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement, each step a declaration of purpose. The lobby swallowed her as she entered, marble floors stretching endlessly, columns rising like sentinels, the air humming with the soft chatter of strangers. She barely noticed, her mind already racing ahead to the conference, to the speech she'd deliver, to the broader war for justice she'd waged for years. The elevator ride to her room was a quiet ascent, her reflection flickering in the polished steel doors. When they parted, she felt it steady, unshakable determination anchoring her. Today had tested her, yes, but it had also reminded her of the fire within. This wasn't the end. It was merely the spark. Her hotel room greeted her with pristine elegance. A vast window dominated one wall, framing Denver's skyline in a dazzling sprawl of lights that pulsed like a living thing. The faint hum of traffic drifted up from below, muted by thick glass, while the room carried the subtle scent of fresh linen and lavender, a deliberate touch of serenity. Amid the city's chaos, Monica set her suitcase by the bed, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were shedding the weight of the day with each step. She kicked off her heels, the cool floor relief against her aching feet, and sank into the plush armchair by the window. A long, slow breath escaped her, the silence of the room pressing in, both comforting and unnerving. Her phone buzzed again on the side table, a persistent reminder of the world beyond these walls. But she let it sit. For now, she needed this space to breathe, to unravel the tangle of thoughts still knotted in her mind. The leather-bound notebook from her flight rested nearby, its surface catching the dim glow of the lamp. She reached for it, her fingers tracing its smooth edges before flipping it open to the page she'd scribbled on hours earlier. Her own handwriting stared back at her, bold and unapologetic. Change doesn't come from comfort. It comes from discomfort, from forcing people to face what they'd rather bury. She lingered on the words, her pen hovering above the paper as a flood of memories rushed into gate agent's sneer. Sharp as a blade, the supervisor's dismissive wave, as though she were a nuisance to be swatted away. The hushed murmurs of passengers who judged her before she'd even opened her mouth. Those moments had sliced deep, leaving invisible scars. But they'd also stoked a fire she refused to let die. Anger was a double-edged sword. She knew let it rule you, and it would burn you out. Wield it wisely, and it could forge something unbreakable. She pressed the pen to the page, her thoughts spilling out in a steady stream. Today wasn't just my fight. It was for everyone who's ever been erased, silenced, shoved aside. It's not about me, it's about us. And this battle is nowhere near its end. She paused, tapping the pen lightly against the paper, her mind drifting to the young woman at the baggage claim. That trembling voice, those wide eyes brimming with awe that caught her off guard, pierced through the armor she'd built. It was a reminder. Her strength wasn't just for her own survival. It rippled outward, touching lives she'd never know. She wrote again, the words flowing faster now. There will always be those who doubt you, who box you in, who see your existence as a threat. But their smallness isn't your truth. Your truth is your resilience, your voice, your refusal to shrink. She closed the notebook gently, the storm in her mind quieting at last. Standing by the window, her reflection melded with the city's glow, a silhouette against the night. Tomorrow's speech blew me to call for equity, for justice, for the power of standing tall. She'd lived it today, not on a stage, but in the raw, unglamorous chaos of an airport gate. The weight of her words felt heavier now, rooted in the visceral truth of her experience. They had to matter not just to the crowd, but to her. Morning arrived with a burst of energy. The hotel lobby alive with the clamor of conference attendees. Monica moved through the throng, her heels striking the marble with a rhythmic certainty. Eyes followed her, some curious, some admiring, but she carried herself with the same quiet poise that had carried her through yesterday's ordeal, her chin lifted, her gaze steady. At the conference hall, a staff member greeted her, a bright smile lighting up her face. "Miss Carter, it's an honor to have you here," she said, extending a hand with genuine warmth. "Thank you," Monica replied, her voice calm but kind, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. She glanced at the stage ahead, its polished wood gleaming under the spotlights, a platform for the truth she'd come to share. Backstage, she took a moment alone, closing her eyes as the hum of the crowd faded. She breathed deeply, centering herself, the echoes of yesterday fueling her resolve. This was her father's and everyone else, and she was ready. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the delicate whisper of floral perfume, swirling through the air as Monica slowly opened her eyes. The room came into focus, and there stood Elizabeth, a few feet away, her silhouette framed by the soft morning light filtering through the window. Elizabeth's gaze held a potent blend of pride and quiet worry, her lips parting as she spoke in a tender, almost hesitant tone. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice a gentle thread weaving through the stillness. Monica met her friend's eyes, her own expression serene yet unyielding, a calm born from deep resolve. She nodded once, a subtle movement that carried the weight of her certainty. "I was born ready," she replied, her words steady, laced with the faintest trace of a smile that flickered like a candle in the wind. There was no bravado in her tone, only a quiet confidence that seemed to hum beneath her skin. Elizabeth stepped closer, her presence warm and grounding, and rested a hand lightly on Monica's arm. Her touch was both a comfort and a charge. "Go out there and show them who you are," she urged, her voice firm yet encouraging. "Make them feel like every bit of it." "I will," Monica promised, her voice resolute as she turned toward the stage. The auditorium stretched out before her, a vast expanse of muted anticipation. As she stepped forward, the polite ripple of applause greeted her, restrained and tentative, like the first drops of rain on dry earth. The audience didn't truly know her yet, not her story, not her fire, but they would soon. She reached the podium, her fingers brushing its edge with a feather-light touch, grounding herself as she surveyed the sea of faces. Some watched with curiosity, others with indifference, but all were hers to reach. When Monica began to speak, her voice cut through the air with a clarity that demanded attention, each syllable deliberate and weighted. "Yesterday," she said, pausing to let the words settle, "I was reminded of a truth so simple yet so profound it's easy to overlook. Change doesn't bloom in the soft cradle of comfort. It rises from the jagged edges of confrontation, from forcing people to face the things they'd rather bury in the shadows." The room hushed, her words sinking into the silence like stones dropping into a still pond, sending ripples outward. She let the moment breathe, the tension in the air thickening as her audience absorbed the gravity of what she'd said. "Today," she continued, her tone shifting to something more intimate, more urgent, "I'm not here to preach from on high. I'm here to stand with you, to speak with you about the raw realities we navigate every day, the battles we wage, the quiet victories we claim, and the power we all carry to reshape the world, not just for ourselves but for those who've been told they don't belong." The applause started as a murmur, a hesitant scattering of sound, then swelled into a steady roar as her words struck chords deep within the crowd. Monica felt the heaviness of the previous day begin to lift, replaced by a blazing sense of purpose that warmed her from the inside out. The stage lights bathed her in a soft, golden glow, casting her shadow long and sharp against the backdrop. She stood tall, her posture unwavering, her presence a quiet command that filled the cavernous conference hall. Her eyes swept over the audience, again some faces alight with awe, their mouths slightly parted as they hung on her every word, others tense, brows knit in discomfort, perhaps wrestling with truths they'd long avoided. Apathy was her enemy, not unease, and the electric charge in the room told her she'd pierced through the veil of indifference. Her hands rested lightly on the podium, steady as she pressed forward. "Yesterday," she said, her voice dropping to a measured cadence, "I stood at an airport gate, a first-class ticket clutched in my hand, a ticket I'd earned, a seat I deserved. But instead of a welcome, I faced suspicion. Not because of the ticket, not because of some glitch in the system, but because of the silent judgments etched into the eyes of those who saw me before I even spoke." The room fell deathly silent, her words draping over the crowd like a heavy shroud. She paused, letting the weight of her story settle, drawing them deeper into the moment. "I've had time to turn that moment over in my mind, to peel back its layers. It wasn't just about a seat on a planet, it was about the 1,000 tiny cuts people like me endure. The subtle and not so subtle ways we're told we're less than, that our place is always in question, no matter how far we climb." A faint murmur stirred through the audience, a ripple of recognition. Monica didn't waver. She leaned forward slightly, her voice softening, pulling them in closer. "But here's the unshakable truth. They only win if we let them, if we swallow our voices, if we fold ourselves small to fit their narrow molds. We hand them the reins. And I, for one, refuse to bow to that." She straightened, her voice rising like a tide, fierce and unapologetic. "Change doesn't whisper in the stillness of silence, it roars in the chaos of confrontation. It demands we challenge the world as it is, that we fight for something better, not just for ourselves, but for every soul who'll walk this path after us." The room seemed to shift, faces softening as her words took root. In the front row, a woman with silver-streaked hair dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled tissue, her shoulders trembling faintly. Beside her, a man in a crisp suit nodded slowly, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, as if anchoring himself against the tide of her conviction. Monica stepped back from the podium, letting the silence swell. She didn't need to fill every second with sound. Sometimes the absence of words carried a deeper resonance than anything she could say. As the applause rose again, tentative at first, but building into a steady wave, Monica allowed herself a small, private smile. She stepped off the stage, her heart still hammering against her ribs, and found Elizabeth waiting in the wings. Her friend's face glowed with pride, her eyes sharp with a quiet ferocity. "That was incredible," Elizabeth said, her voice low but brimming with fervor. "You had them tethered to every word." Monica exhaled, the knot in her shoulders loosening just a fraction. "It's not about me," she murmured, her tone soft but firm. "It's about the Mabot planting something, even if I never see it take root." Elizabeth's smile widened, her eyes glinting with unspoken approval. "You've done more than plant a seed, Monica. You've ignited something real." Backstage, a tide of people surged toward hair organizers with clipboards clutched to their chests, fellow speakers with eager grins, attendees who'd slipped past security to offer their thanks. Each handshake, each whispered thank you felt like a pebble tossed into a vast sea, small yet part of something greater. Monica didn't linger in the praise, her mind already drifting to the work still ahead. But one encounter stopped her cold. A man approached, his salt and pepper hair catching the dim light, a worn leather briefcase swinging at his side. His suit was pristine, but his posture was hesitant, almost fragile. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice a low tremble, "I just wanted to thank you. Your speech had hit me hard." Monica tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Thank you," she said warmly, inviting him to continue. "What struck you?" the man faltered, his gaze dropping to the scuffed floor. "My daughter," he said at last, the words spilling out like a confession. "She's only 12, but she's already been through so much. The way you talked about belonging, about claiming your space, it made me think of her." His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard. "I want her to know she doesn't have to shrink herself, that she doesn't owe anyone an apology for existing." Monica's heart softened, a tender ache blooming in her chest. She rested a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but steady. "She doesn't," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "And neither do you. The greatest gift you can give her is to show her every single day that she's enough in it. Because of what she does, but because of who she is." The man nodded, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered again, the words barely audible as he turned away, clutching his briefcase like a lifeline. That night, Monica sat by the window of her hotel room, the city's lights sprawling endlessly before her like a tapestry of stars fallen to earth. The day's weight pressed into her bones, but her spirit felt lighter, buoyed by the echoes of what she'd set in motion. She opened her notebook, the blank page staring back at her, and let her pen hover for a moment before she wrote, "Today, I spoke my truth, and for the first time in too long, I felt it ripple outward. Words alone aren't enough, how inspiration fades. It's action that breathes life into change, that keeps it alive." She paused, her gaze drifting to the skyline. The fight was far from won, but something had shifted subtly, like the first crack of dawn breaking the night. With that thought, she set the pen down and let herself rest, knowing tomorrow would bring fresh battles and new chances to push forward. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the room, painting golden streaks across the carpet. Outside, the city hummed with life, commuters weaving through crowded streets, the distant blare of horns a faint pulse in the air. But inside, the quiet wrapped around Monica like a cocoon. She sat by the window, a steaming cup of tea cradled in her hands, her eyes tracing the jagged peaks of the Denver skyline. Her mind wandered back to the day before, a speech that had poured from her soul, the conversations that lingered like echoes, the stand she'd taken at the airport gate. Each moment felt like a thread in a larger weave, a tapestry of justice and consequence she was only beginning to understand. The lesson wasn't just in the victories. She realized that it was in the cost of silence, the price of letting power go unchecked. And as she sipped her tea, the warmth seeping into her hands, she knew she'd carry that truth with her, a quiet fire to fuel the days ahead. The weight of responsibility bore down on Monica like an unrelenting storm, pressing into her shoulders as she sat quietly at her small kitchen table. Her phone jolted to life with a sharp buzz, snapping her out of the swirling maze of her thoughts. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the cool metal, and her brow creased as she glimpsed the name on the screen, Elizabeth. The message was short but urgent. "You're making wave," the news. Monica's pulse quickened, a flicker of unease sparking in her chest. She set the phone down and pulled her laptop closer, the faint hum of the device filling the room as she typed her own name into the search bar. With trembling hands, the screen flared to life, flooded with headlines that seemed to scream at her, each one bolder and more insistent than the last. Traveler confronts discrimination at airport, ignites corporate accountability. Governor Elizabeth Davis champions equity in public spaces. Monica Carter's stand sparks national dialogue on systemic racism. The words dance before her eyes, surreal yet piercingly real, as if they belonged to someone else's life, a life she'd somehow stumbled into. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze lingering on the glowing screen, the weight of it all sinking deeper into her bones. The media had seized her story, a fleeting moment at the airport now ballooning into something vast and uncontainable, far beyond anything she'd ever dreamed. But the spotlight itself wasn't what stirred her, no. It was the chance to carve meaning from the chaos, to channel this unexpected surge of attention into something that could endure. She snapped the laptop shut, the sound sharp in the quiet room, and drew in a slow, steadying breath. The day ahead loomed: larga panels, discussions, a relentless cascade of opportunities to leave her mark. Monica sipped the last of her tea, the warmth spreading through her like a quiet anchor, tethering her as she braced herself to step back into the fray. The conference hall thrummed with a restless energy when she arrived, a sea of voices and footsteps echoing off the high ceilings. Attendees wove through the crowd, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights, swaying gently as they traded handshakes and ideas. Monica moved among them with a calm assurance, her presence understated yet magnetic. She offered polite nods to those who caught her eye, their faces lighting up with recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the story she carried. Her panel was set for late morning, and by the time she climbed the steps to the stage, the room had swelled with people, their murmurs settling into an expectant hush. The moderator's voice boomed through the cavernous space, introducing her alongside the other panelists, each name met with a ripple of applause. When her moment came, Monica rose from her seat, her movements deliberate, and approached the podium. She stood there for a heartbeat, feeling the cool wood beneath her fingertips, then began to speak. Her voice was low at first, steady, but laced with intention. Yesterday, something hit me, truth so simple it's easy to overlook. Change doesn't bloom in comfort. It's born in the friction of confrontation, in the courage to drag what's hidden into the light, to make people face what they'd rather turn away from. The audience shifted, leaning forward, their attention sharpening like a blade. She paused, letting the silence stretch, her words hovering in the air before she pressed on. What happened to me at the airport wasn't some rare fluke, a one-off I could shrug off. It was a mirror held up to a system that too often strips us of our humanity, that looks past us unless we force it to see. But the real scandal isn't that these moments happen, it's that they're allowed to slip by, unchallenged, unnoticed, as if they're just the cost of doing business. Her tone lifted, a thread of fire weaving through it. We've been taught to bite our tongues, to smooth over the rough edges, to settle for scraps and call it enough. But silence isn't a shield, it's a gift to those who thrive on keeping things as they are. The only way forward is to speak, to shout if we have to, especially when it's hard, especially when it scares us. As she spoke, Monica watched the room transform. Some in the crowd nodded, their eyes alight with a quiet fire, a shared awakening blooming in their expressions. Others sat back, their faces softening, lost in thought as her words burrowed into them. She didn't frame her airport ordeal as a trophy to flaunt, but as a spark to ignite something bigger. "This isn't about me alone," she said, her voice firm yet warm. "It's about every one of us. It's about building a world where no one has to plead for their place, where dignity isn't a privilege doled out to the lucky few, where we're all seen it as problems to solve, but as people, whole and real." The room grew still, her words slicing through the air with a clarity that left no room for ambiguity. Monica stood tall, her hands resting lightly on the podium, feeling the weight of every gaze locked on her. This wasn't just a speech, it was a reckoning, a moment where the threads of their stories tangled into something undeniable. When she finished, the applause started soft, tentative, like the first drops of rain, then swelled into a torrent that crashed through the space. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she stepped back, the sound washing over her. She hadn't set out to stand here, to bare her soul on this stage, but now that she had, retreat wasn't an option. As the session dissolved into a hum of conversation, people approached Hersom with questions, others with gratitude, a few with trembling voices and stories of their own. Each exchange felt like a thread in a growing tapestry, a reminder that change wasn't a solitary act, but a web of connection. One encounter lingered in her mind long after the others faded. A young woman edged toward her through the thinning crowd, her curly hair pulled back in a loose, haphazard bun, strands slipping free to frame her nervous face. She stopped a few steps away, her hands twisting together as she spoke, her voice quivering but earnest. "Miss Carter, I just needed to thank you. I've been through things like what you talked about, and I never knew what to do, how to push back. Listening to you today, it made me feel like maybe I could." Monica's chest tightened, a rush of warmth flooding her. She reached out, resting a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder, her touch steadying. "Hope's the first step," she said softly, "but don't let it end there. Take that feeling and run with it, turn it into something you can wield. Your voice is yours, and it's got more power than you know." The woman's eyes glistened, a shaky smile breaking through, and Monica knew that moment would stay with her. That night, Monica sank into the chair by her hotel room window, her body aching from the day's demands, but her spirit blazing. The city sprawled out below, a constellation of lights stretching into the dark, endless and alive. The weight of everything she'd said, everything she'd heard, settled over her net as a burden, but as a purpose she could carry. She pulled her notebook from her bag, flipping to a crisp, untouched page, and let her pen glide across it. The words came slowly, each one carved with care. "Today, I saw it what happens when people collide. When their stories weave together, when voices rise as one. Change isn't instant, but it's real. It starts in the small things, in a question, a conversation, a refusal to let enough be enough." She paused, her gaze drifting to the skyline, the vastness of it mirroring the fight still ahead. It wasn't finished, maybe it never would, debut that didn't dim its worth. She closed the notebook and leaned back, the road stretching out in her mind, long and winding, but hers to travel, not just for herself, but for every soul who'd been hushed, overlooked, or cast aside. Change wasn't a dream to chase, it was a vow to uphold, and Monica Carter was determined to see it through. Her journey had begun in a flash of indignity, a single spark at the airport that could have flickered out unnoticed. Instead, it had roared into a force, her voice rippling far beyond those sterile halls to touch lives she'd never meet. Justice wasn't about one shining win, it was about the slow, steady swell of voices demanding more, refusing to bend under the weight of power misused. Monica, with her quiet strength, her unshakable grace, stood as a beacon in that chorus, urging others to rise with her. What started as a wound had forged a movement, a testament to the truth that standing tall, speaking loud, and rejecting silence could shift the world. Her story didn't just rewrite her own path, it lit a fire that still burns, a conversation unfolding with every new voice it draws in. And in that, Monica's resolve shines brightest, a reminder that the fight for what's right is never solitary, that together our voices hold a power no injustice can outlast.